The twin suns of Lyceria glowed softly in the lavender sky as a golden trumpet echoed across the royal plaza. Thousands of Lycerans gathered around the marble platform, standing still like statues. The royal selection ceremony was about to begin, and it only happened once every 2 centuries. Princess Seralia, heir to the mighty Lyceran Empire, stood at the top of the wide staircase. She wore her ceremonial armor, made of polished silver and blue crystals that shimmered like water. Her long white hair was braided with ancient symbols of her house. Her violet eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over the crowd with calm strength. She looked proud, but inside, she felt trapped. The High Council had made their decision. She had delayed for 3 years, giving excuses, claiming she needed time. But now they forced her hand. Today, she had to choose a mate from the approved list of royal Lyceran suitors, and she hated it. To her left stood 5 tall Lyceran nobles, all powerful warriors, scientists, and diplomats. They were strong, handsome, and genetically perfect. Each one had been trained to be a ruler, but to Seralia, they all seemed the same. They were proud of their bloodline, proud of their achievements, and proud of themselves. None of them had curiosity. None of them had humility. She wanted someone different, someone who could help her change the empire. Behind the nobles stood a small group of honored guests, aliens from allied worlds, here only to observe. Among them stood Elias Carter, a young human scientist from Earth. He was not tall, not powerful, and definitely not a warrior. He wore a simple gray uniform and held a datapad in his hand, still recording cultural notes. He didn't even know he had been noticed. Elias had been invited as part of a peaceful science exchange. He specialized in alien biology and social behavior. He had come to Lyceria to learn about them, not to be part of a royal ceremony. In fact, he was just about to leave the plaza to avoid the crowd. The royal announcer's voice rang out, Princess Seralia of House Velcara, first of her name. Sovereign heir of the empire shall now fulfill the right of choice and name her consort before the people. Silence fell over the entire plaza. Everyone waited. The suitors straightened their backs. The crowd leaned forward. Seralia stepped forward slowly, her footsteps echoing on the stone. She raised her hand and pointed across the nobles, past the guards, and straight at the confused human with the datapad. Elias blinked. A murmur spread like wildfire through the crowd. The nobles looked stunned. The guards turned toward the human. The High Council looked at each other in disbelief. Even Elias didn't know how to react. He looked behind him, thinking she must have pointed at someone else. But Seralia's voice rang out, loud and clear. I, Seralia of House Velcara, choose Elias Carter of Earth as my consort. Gasps echoed across the plaza. One of the nobles stepped forward in protest. He is not Lyceran. He is not even a warrior. He has not passed the trials. But the princess lifted her hand again. I followed the law. The right of choice says I may choose anyone in the Empire or any ally world. Earth is a protectorate of the Empire. Elias is eligible. My choice is final. Elias opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. A dozen royal guards surrounded him. He didn't resist. He couldn't even move. His datapad slipped from his fingers. 2 guards picked it up while others gently but firmly led him toward the stairs. His legs were shaking as he walked. His heart pounded. What had just happened? Seralia met him at the top of the platform. For the first time, he saw her up close. She was taller than him by a head, her features noble but calm. She smiled faintly, and her eyes sparkled with something he couldn't quite understand. Don't be afraid, she whispered. You were never in danger. I don't understand, Elias said quietly. Why me? Because you're not like them, she said. And that's exactly what I need. The ceremony ended with confused applause. The people didn't know whether to celebrate or argue. The suitors were furious but silent. They couldn't challenge royal law in public. The High Council remained still, their eyes unreadable. Elias was taken to the palace, still unsure if he was dreaming or trapped in a strange alien drama. As the doors closed behind him, the Lyciran Empire began to change, quietly, without anyone realizing it yet. Because Seralia had not just chosen a mate, she had chosen a spark. Elias Carter stood in the center of a crystal blue chamber, eyes wide and thoughts spinning like a storm. It had been only a few hours since Princess Seralia chose him as her royal consort, but it already felt like a dream gone too far. The palace was enormous, all shining glass towers, glowing walls, and smooth halls that hummed with quiet energy. Lycirans walked gracefully past him, tall and elegant in their flowing robes or armored suits. And wherever Elias went, eyes followed him. He was the only human. Guards in silver armor stood at every corner, and a royal steward named Kelric had been assigned to assist him. Kelric, a serious-looking Lyciran with short silver hair and emerald skin, clearly did not approve of Elias, but followed his orders strictly. "You will dine with the princess at the high table tonight," Kelric said stiffly. "Until then, you are not to leave your guest chambers without escort. You are now part of the royal house. Protocol must be respected." "I'm not used to palaces," Elias replied quietly. Kelric raised an eyebrow. Clearly. Left alone in his chambers, Elias walked slowly around the room. Everything was luxurious. Soft furniture made from glowing silk, curved windows that showed the twin suns over the mountains, and walls that responded to voice commands. But he didn't feel safe. He was a biologist, a peaceful man who studied alien life and culture. He had come here to observe, not become part of a political storm. Why had Seralia chosen him? What did she see that others didn't? There was a soft knock at the door. Elias turned, expecting a guard. Instead, it was her. Princess Seralia stood in the doorway, no guards behind her. She wore a simple robe, her silver armor gone. Her long white hair was loose, falling over her shoulders. She looked calm. "May I enter?" she asked. Elias nodded. Quickly. "Of course, Your Highness. Seralia is fine when we are alone." She stepped inside, moving with quiet grace. Elias stood awkwardly near a glowing chair. "I don't understand any of this." She sat down and folded her hands in her lap. "You're not meant to, yet, but you will." He sat across from her. "Why me? I'm not strong like your people. I'm not trained for war or politics. I don't even know your customs properly." "You are not like us. That's the point." Seralia looked out the window as she spoke. "Our empire is strong, but it's also stuck. We repeat the same ways, the same beliefs, over and over. Perfect order, perfect logic, but no new heart, no change." She looked back at him. "You humans, you grow fast. You survive chaos. You adapt. You feel deeply, but you still move forward. That is power, too, just a different kind." Elias was silent. No one had ever said something like that to him. "Then why now?" he asked. "Why not choose a human diplomat or someone trained to lead?" "Because they would be prepared," she said softly. "And I needed someone honest, someone real." Elias didn't know how to respond. For a moment they sat quietly, the hum of the palace around them. "Do you regret pointing at me?" he asked. Seralia smiled. "Not for a second. That evening, Elias was led to the royal dining hall. It was a vast room with a sky-painted ceiling and floating lanterns. He sat beside the princess, facing nobles and officials from all over the empire. The table was silent as food was served. strange but delicious dishes made from glowing fruit, blue meats, and floating drinks. The nobles whispered among themselves. Some looked curious, others looked angry. A few looked amused. The one who looked most dangerous was Lord Viel, a proud general with golden eyes and armor engraved with victories. He had been one of the suitors. Viel stood suddenly. "Your Highness," he said loudly, "I mean no disrespect, but your chosen consort has no military background, no Lyciran blood, and no record of serving the Empire. How will he survive the trials of flame, mind, and heart?" The room fell quiet. Elias froze. "Trials?" Seralia's voice was calm. "He will face them, as the law requires. But strength is not only muscle. We will see who truly understands survival." Viel bowed slightly. "Then we shall watch closely." That night, back in his chamber, Elias felt the pressure settle deep in his chest. He was not just an outsider anymore. He was a target. The next morning, his suspicions were confirmed. While walking through the garden with a royal guide, a metallic snake leapt from the flowers, aiming straight for his throat. The guide screamed. The guards were too far. Elias stumbled back, but Seralia appeared out of nowhere. She moved like lightning, her blade slicing the snake in half. She stood between Elias and the broken machine, her breath calm, her stance strong. "Your enemies are already afraid," she said without turning around. "Which means we're doing something right." Elias looked at the shattered attacker. It was no wild animal. It was a weapon. "I don't know if I can survive this," he whispered. Seralia turned to face him. "Then survive for now, one day at a time." And with that, she helped him to his feet. Elias looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just a ruler but a fighter, a protector, and someone carrying the weight of an entire empire. For the first time, he didn't feel like a mistake. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was here for a reason. The sound of metal drums echoed through the training halls of the Lyciran Palace. The time had come. Elias Carter, the human chosen by Princess Seralia, was to face the 3 royal trials: flame, mind, and heart. These were ancient tests created by the Lyciran ancestors to judge a consort's worth. Most Lycirans trained for years to prepare. Elias had barely been on the planet for a week. Yet the law was clear. If he was to stand beside the princess, he had to pass all 3 trials. No exceptions. No help. Seralia watched him from the high balcony. She did not smile. Her face was calm, but her heart was heavy. She knew this would not be easy for him. Elias stood in the center of the arena, wearing lightweight armor given to him by the palace. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were focused. He had spent the last few days studying Lyciran traditions, training his body and clearing his mind. He was afraid, but he was also ready to try. The first trial was the trial of flame. In front of him stood 3 fire beasts, mechanical creatures made from molten rock and living flame. They were fast, hot, and designed to chase and corner their target. The goal was not to defeat them in combat, but to reach the other side of the arena without getting caught or burned. Most warriors used shields and speed. Elias had a different plan. As the horn blew and the beasts charged forward, Elias ran straight at the smallest one, but instead of trying to fight, he jumped sideways and rolled under it, slipping into a gap between 2 stone pillars. From there, he used the terrain to his advantage, leading the beasts into crashing into each other. By the time he reached the finish line, smoke filled the air, and the crowd was on its feet. He had passed the first trial, not with brute force, but with cleverness. Seralia allowed herself a small smile. The second trial was the trial of mind. Elias was brought into a dark room filled with holographic illusions. He had to solve 5 puzzles using logic, observation, and timing, all while being distracted by loud sounds, flashing lights, and false paths. He failed the first puzzle and almost gave up. But then he sat down, took a breath, and remembered what he always told his students back on Earth. Think like a scientist. Observe. Don't rush. He started again, slower this time, and one by one, he solved the puzzles. When he stepped out of the chamber, sweaty and tired, the judges nodded in approval. He had passed the second trial. Now came the final and most difficult, the trial of heart. This trial was not about strength or intelligence. It was about character. It took place in a quiet stone garden. Elias entered the garden alone. In the center stood an elderly Lyciran woman with sad eyes. Behind her was a young boy, trembling with fear, and on the ground lay a small creature, wounded and crying in pain. A voice echoed in the air. You may only save one, the wise elder, the frightened child, or the innocent creature. Choose. Elias froze. The elder looked calm. The child clung to her leg. The creature whimpered. He walked forward and asked the woman a question. Can you help the child if I take the creature? The woman nodded. Yes, but I am weak. He looked at the child. Can you help the creature if I help her? The boy nodded slowly. Elias smiled. Then we all help each other. He picked up the elder and carried her to safety. The boy followed, helping the creature. When he reached the exit, the garden vanished. It had all been an illusion, but the choice had been real. The elders and judges stood silently. Then one by one they began to applaud. The crowd roared. Elias Carter, a human, a stranger to this world, had passed all three trials, not through violence, not through pride, but through kindness, creativity, and courage. Saralia came down from her balcony and walked straight to him. You did it? She said. I thought I'd faint during the second one, Elias said, trying to catch his breath. She laughed softly. You've earned the title of consort, but more importantly, you've earned their respect. The High Council was forced to accept the results. Elias was no longer just a visitor or a strange choice. He was now officially part of the royal court. But not everyone was pleased. From the shadows of the crowd, Lord Viel watched silently. His eyes burned with jealousy and anger. He turned to a hooded figure beside him. It's time, he said. He may have passed the trials, but he will not survive what comes next. Back in his chamber that evening, Elias sat on the edge of his bed, looking at the stars through the tall window. He had never imagined his peaceful research trip would turn into this. But somehow, deep inside, he felt different now, stronger, more awake. A knock came at the door. It was Saralia. She entered without a word and sat beside him. Thank you, she said, not just for winning the trials, but for showing my people a new way to lead. Elias looked at her. I didn't do it alone. You believed in me when no one else did. The room fell into a peaceful silence as the stars above Lyciria shimmered gently. But beyond the palace walls, in the hidden corners of the empire, a storm was beginning to rise. Enemies were watching, and they were ready to strike. The royal gardens, once peaceful and full of blooming silver flowers, had become a place of whispered secrets. Lord Viel, the proud Lyciran general who had opposed Elias from the start, paced slowly in the shadows. His golden eyes burned with anger and jealousy. He was not used to losing, not used to being ignored. The nobles who had supported him gathered nearby, their faces grim. They hated the idea of a human, a creature from a primitive planet, standing beside Princess Saralia. We must act, Viel said quietly, his voice sharp like a blade. This outsider threatens our empire's future. If we allow him to stay, we lose everything. A hooded figure stepped forward. We have a plan, she said. But it is risky. Vial nodded. Risk is acceptable if it restores order. Meanwhile, Elias sat in his chambers, unaware of the growing storm. He spent his days learning more about Lysiran culture, language, and history. Princess Saralia often visited him, teaching him quietly in the afternoons. "You must understand," she told him one day, "that not everyone will welcome you. Some see you as a threat, others see you as a mistake." Elias nodded. "I'm ready to face them. I want to help." But the truth was, he felt tired. The palace was beautiful but full of tension. He missed Earth sometimes, the open sky, the simple life. One evening, a message arrived for Elias. It was a royal summons to appear before the High Council. The council chamber was cold and formal. The rulers sat in high seats, their faces unreadable. Lord Vial stepped forward. "Consort." "Elias," he said smoothly, "we have reason to believe you have committed an act of sabotage against the Empire." Elias blinked. "What? That's impossible." Vial smiled thinly. "Evidence will be presented." Two guards brought forward a small device, a broken piece of machinery used to control palace defenses. It was covered in human fingerprints. "The council murmured. Some looked shocked, others frowned. Elias tried to speak, but Vial raised his hand. "Until this matter is resolved, Consort Elias will be detained." Saralia's face was pale as she watched Elias being led away. She clenched her fists but said nothing. Later that night, she met secretly with Elias in a hidden chamber. "I know you didn't do this," she whispered. "Someone wants to remove you." Elias nodded. "But how can we prove it?" She smiled, slightly. "We will find the truth. I will not let my consort fall to lies." Together they began to search for clues. The palace halls were full of eyes and ears. Every step was watched. Elias used his knowledge of human science and technology to analyze the broken device. It was tampered with, made to look like he was guilty. They discovered hidden messages in the palace data streams, secret plans sent between Vial and unknown conspirators. But before they could act, an ambush came. Late one night, Elias was attacked by masked assassins in the corridors. He fought back with everything he had learned, dodging and blocking blows. Just as one attacker lunged, Saralia appeared, her blade flashing in the dim light. Together they drove the attackers away. Breathing hard, Elias looked at Saralia. "They want us dead," she nodded. "We must be careful. The enemy is closer than we think." Days passed. The trial of truth was called, a rare ancient rite where the accused speaks openly before the people and the gods. Elias stood before the crowd in the grand hall, his heart pounding. He spoke clearly, honestly, telling the story of the conspiracy, the tampered evidence, and the attacks. He told the Lysirans about Earth, about human values of honesty and courage. The crowd listened, some skeptical, others moved. When the ritual magic confirmed his words, shining light over him like a halo, the council had no choice. The false charges were dropped. Lord Vial's supporters were arrested, but Vial himself vanished into the shadows, swearing revenge. Saralia and Elias stood together in the palace gardens as the stars rose above Lysiria. "We survived," Elias said quietly. "Yes," Saralia replied. "But this is only the beginning. The Empire needs more than survival. It needs change." Elias looked at her, hope burning in his chest. Together, they would build a future, one where differences were strength and courage came in many forms. The night air was thick with tension. The Lysiran palace, shining like a beacon under the twin moons, was no longer a place of peace. Lord Vial, thought defeated, had gathered his hidden forces. Rogue warships from loyal followers hovered just beyond the city's protective shields. They waited for the perfect moment to strike. Inside the palace, Elias Carter paced the polished halls. His mind raced. The trial had cleared him of false charges, but the danger was far from over. Princess Seralia joined him, her armor gleaming softly in the moonlight. "They are coming," she said quietly. "We must prepare." Together, they called the loyal, guards and strategists. The palace would not fall without a fight. The battle began with a sudden deafening roar. Missiles blazed across the sky as enemy warships breached the outer defenses. Explosions shook the palace walls. Inside, chaos erupted. Servants and nobles scrambled for safety. Guards rushed to defend the gates and halls. Elias found himself in the heart of the storm, fighting alongside Seralia. Though he was a human with no training in Lyciran combat, Elias used what he knew: quick thinking, creative tactics, and a fierce will to survive. At one point, the enemy broke through a side entrance. Elias led a small group to block their path using energy barriers and traps he helped design. The fight was fierce, but the palace held. Amid the battle, Seralia was wounded, a deep cut across her arm. Elias carried her to a safe room, ignoring the pain in his own body. "You should rest," she said, her voice soft but strong. "I'm not leaving you," Elias replied. "We fight together." She smiled weakly. "That is why I chose you." Outside, the palace's defenses were faltering. The attackers pushed harder, using powerful weapons never seen before. Elias realized that if the palace fell, everything Seralia and he had worked for would be lost. He took command of a defense outpost, a small control center overlooking the city walls. Using human technology combined with Lyciran energy systems, Elias managed to strengthen the shields and redirect power to weak spots. His actions slowed the enemy advance, giving the loyal forces time to regroup. The battle stretched on for hours, the city lit by flashes of energy and fire. Finally, the rogue warships began to retreat, their losses too great. The palace stood strong, battered but unbroken. In the quiet after the fight, the citizens gathered in the great hall. They cheered Elias and Seralia, not just as rulers, but as symbols of hope and courage. Seralia stepped forward and spoke to the crowd. "Today, we faced danger from within, but together, we stood strong. We are no longer divided by blood or origin. We are one empire." Turning to Elias, she added, "And I name you Prince Protector, defender of our people and our future." Elias felt a surge of pride and responsibility. He had come from a distant planet, unknown and untrained in war. Yet here he was, standing beside a princess who believed in him, fighting for a new kind of empire. That night, as the stars shone softly over Lyciria, Elias and Seralia walked in the palace gardens. She looked at him with gentle eyes. "When I first chose you, many thought I was foolish, but you showed them the power of the human spirit." Elias smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you." She reached out and took his hand. "Together, we will build a future where differences make us stronger." Peace had returned to Lyciria, but the air was different now, charged with hope and new beginnings. Elias Carter stood on the balcony of the royal palace, looking out over the sprawling city below. The twin suns cast a warm glow on the silver, towers and the gardens that bloomed with strange glowing flowers. Beside him stood Princess Seralia, now more than just a ruler. She was his partner in a future no one had dared to imagine. The empire was changing, slowly, quietly, but with power. In the weeks after the great battle, Elias and Seralia worked side by side. Elias introduced new ideas, inspired by Earth's values of cooperation, creativity, and respect for all beings. Seralia listened, and together they reformed the High Council. More voices were heard now, not just nobles, but scholars, citizens, and even representatives from other species allied with Lyciria. The empire was becoming a place of true diplomacy. Ambassadors from distant worlds came to witness the new, Lyciran-human alliance. They were curious but cautious. Elias stood before the Galactic Concord, a council of many alien races, and spoke with quiet confidence. "We are stronger when we learn from each other," he said. "When we accept change, we build a future together." His words were simple, but carried weight. The Concord applauded, marking the first real step toward peace across many star systems. Back home, Elias and Seralia often walked the palace gardens, hand in hand. One evening, beneath the soft glow of the twin moons, Seralia looked at Elias with a smile. "When I first saw you, I didn't choose you out of pity or rebellion." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" "Because I saw a spark, a light that our empire had forgotten, a light of hope, courage, and heart." Elias smiled softly. "You were right," he said. "We were meant to find each other." Their journey had not been easy. There were still challenges ahead. Some nobles remained suspicious. Some alien worlds watched carefully, waiting to see if the new alliance would last. But Elias and Seralia faced every obstacle with strength and unity. They had learned that true power came not from blood or tradition, but from trust and understanding. As the years passed, Lyciria blossomed. New technologies merged human creativity with Lyciran precision. Children of many species played together in the palace schools. The empire became a shining example of what could be achieved when differences were celebrated. And in the quiet moments, Elias would look at Seralia and feel grateful for the day she chose him, the innocent human, and pointed toward a future brighter than anyone could have dreamed.